Hey guys, Josh here, Michigan Whitetail Management. Going over a couple things here for the second Functional Friday. Last week we had some family issues come up. Weather related, wasn't able to do it, so we're getting back on track with our Functional Fridays. So the topic that we have is 4 things that make the property that a property needs to be functional. So 4 things that a property needs to be functional, in my opinion. 1, has to have food. Obviously, we all know that it hinges around food. Early season, through the summer months, early fall, all the way through, especially here in Michigan when you get into those cold temperatures in late fall. Second, has to have water. I think we'll all agree with that. At some point during a 24-hour period, a deer has to go to water. It has to go. So it has to have water to survive. Third, has to have cover. Cover created in or wrapped into a habitat situation, whether that's a bedding area. That could be, depending on the layout of the farm, it could be thick bedding areas such as pines. Here in Michigan we have a lot of conifer, so that heavy dense pine bedding area. It could be a bedding area that's created by hinge cutting, but it has to have that deer has to have cover to survive. So the 4th thing that I feel that a property needs, and probably which is the most important thing after you research 1 through 3 and make sure you know where those 1 through 3 are, where your food is, where your water is, where your cover is. The 4th thing, and the most important thing to me, is your entrance and your exits into and out of that farm. If you do not have number 4, you do not have a successful property, a functional property with 1 through 3. You can have food, you can have the best food, which whether that's in a food plot setup, whether that's in on state land where you're not allowed obviously to do food plots, so that's created around, the focus is created around mass crops such as white acorns and browse, lower browse, and where those deer are, what they have to operate with, where they're at, whether it's cedar, farther northern, up in the UP, for example, the cedar, the browse, them deer up there don't have the luxury of traveling up to a mile to get to a cornfield or a bean field. So here in the lower peninsula, are them deer, do they not only have that browse in their bedding areas, but are they going a mile to get corn? Are they going a mile, 2 miles to get per day to get that to that bean field? The water, where's the water at? Is it in a cedar swamp where it's connected to the bedding area where they do not have to leave bedding to water? They can go days without food, a mass amount of food, but they can't go days without water. So find out where that is. Is it in that triangle setup that we all try to find? The cover is the next thing. How dense is the cover? How close to the cover is, how close to the entrance and exits is your bedding area, is your cover? So all those things keep in mind, and what you'll see sometimes, if you guys follow along on like the properties that I design, and I think it's a piece of the puzzle that sometimes is really overlooked, is if you do not have if you have a bedding area, so to speak, let's say, here in northern Michigan, mid-Michigan, are, in a lot of parts of the country, even in the Midwest, our predominant winds will be from the north and the northwest. So it's no different than us having a hooded sweatshirt on and pulling that hoodie up behind on your back of your neck when the wind is hitting you in the back of the neck when you're out, going to dinner or going to town, or we don't like that wind on the back of our neck. That it sends cold chills through your whole body. It's the same theory with deer. So if you can create that area where you have just set up, you feel that it's the best spot in your design that you just set up for your new plot or plot that you're maintaining or adding on to, whatever that might be. But if your deer are bedded, you have an opportunity to structure more of those deer to bed to the north. Don't hesitate, especially with like conifer, especially with dense pines, is a perfect way to do it, where you're not going to gain anything by hinge cutting a pine tree other than cover and restriction. So what you can do is go along that north side, further away from your entrance and exit, the better. Drop those down on a east to west pattern, and not so thick that they're piled on each other where you can't see through them, but enough that you lay them down, and then where that top ends is just before that top ends, you lay another one down and you continue them to the west. What that does is any wind coming from the north, it's a wind block. Those deer will bed along that shelf that you just created, that wind block that you just created, and then bring yourself down another 50 yards, 25, 50 yards, depending on where you're at, and do it again. Now inside of that area, if you can hinge cut those trees if you hinge cut the hardwood trees, I should say, or your non-valuable trees, hinge cut those down in the direction so you still keep your travel lanes open. You don't want to, and I see this a lot, I see this on some properties that we didn't create, or guys, you know, the more mass hinge cutting the better. Don't do the top over top over top effect. Set those in directional and leave 20, 30 yard runways, corridors in between them. So follow those trees, those pines down. White pines especially are a perfect example. They have a lot of top, a lot of cover. Lay them down on that east to west pattern. There's deer will go in on that south side of the creation that you just made, that wall that you just made, and then just continue yourself down. Now keep yourself further away on that shelf, and especially if there's a creek bottom that divides you, or if there's a ridge that divides you, or whatever that is. And if there's no diversion there because one of the properties that we just actually set up, it's a perfect situation. That slope is actually facing the south. So it's a south-facing slope, so all your heat is on there. You start knocking those conifers down, one thing that's going to happen is all those new shoots and spruce, all those new growth pine and poplar trees are all going to sprout. You're creating habitat, you're creating food. So why I went so far on that is, if you start creating that in certain areas, especially where we are here in Michigan, where you have a lot of pressure, and it builds, those deer are looking for the path of least resistance, and the mature deer are not going to venture into a drama or a hectic area if they don't have to. So it's a point A to point B rhythm that we have to get into, and we have to watch all the points that we connect. So keep that in mind. 4 things that we feel that makes a functional property. 1, obviously, is food. Don't overlook these steps when you're out on. Don't think that this can't be done like out on state land. I use these same tactics. The world does not revolve around a food plot. The world revolves around food, not a food plot. So keep that in mind. So water, if you do not have water, place water. Do not place your water on the edge of a food plot. That's probably the worst spot you can place it. Go between that bedding area and that feed. Even if it's not a plot, that food, whether it's white acorns, wherever your mass crop is, and structure that so you can actually hunt on that. But it all hinges on how do you get into it, and how do you get out of it. If you're on the edge of a field and you a rifle blind, so to speak, can you plant a shield? Can you get in there so you can get in the blind? Is it hidden? Can you get in the blind? Can you get out of the blind at night without destroying or blowing that food plot? Or if you're in a acorn out on state land, for example, if you're in it could be the best spot in the world, but if it's a wide open acorn ridge and the deer are bedding on a south-facing slope, 200 yards, 100 yards from where you're at, and you cannot get in there, do not hunt it. Figure out a way to make that work. Figure out a way to hunt the opposite side of it that is thicker, enter from that other side. Whatever you got to do to put that in your advantage, because that acorn ridge that's wide open on state land, for example, you might hunt it once and you might be successful with a 2-year-old deer, I can almost guarantee you, you're not going to be successful if you hunt that multiple times on a mature buck. It's not gonna happen. He busts you once, game's over. So, we'll be doing some other functional topics here coming along that feed into things that you can gear yourself up for to see on a more of a mature deer status than a lot of us here in Michigan are used to seeing. And I feel pretty blessed to have been able to, not only here on some Michigan properties, but all over the country, in the Midwest especially, where you start seeing the reactions of them mature bucks, and you will fool a 1.5, 2.5, 3.5-year-old deer. You're not going to fool a 4.5-year-old deer more than once. So that's why those initial sets, like on state land, do your homework, look at those aerials, find out where all this 1 through 3 food, water, cover is. Find all of those areas, tie them all together, and make one your first set in the stand is the best sets. Get in there, do it, get it done. And if you feel that you want to keep that low pressure, even if the wind is right and you're not getting busted, don't hunt it for 2 or 3 days. You have to be as frugal with that, or you have to get to a point where you know that if the season comes to an end and you have a tag in your hand and you have to eat tag soup, you're not going to lose value as a person because you had to eat tag soup. So it all ties together. So one of this topic here, this Functional Friday, 4 things that make a property functional. 1 through 3, food, water, cover. The 4th is the most important, entrance and exits.